I've been at Atlassian for about 2.5 years now. More recently, been here in the States at Mountain View for 7 months or so. And I'm really here to talk to you today about one of the ways that we actually tested in production. And some of the customers didn't like it. So more specifically, I'm actually going to be talking about how we rolled out ADG3 to Confluence Cloud. So can I get a show of hands who actually uses the Confluence Cloud product today? All right, so around 15-20% of the crowd, that's good. Can I get a show of hands who used it before we rolled out the design change? All right, about half of that again. And how many of you were frustrated with the actual rollout, like the actual big UI change? All right, so only 2. That's narrowing down, so it's all right. So what I really wanted to bring up is the fact that established users are actually really frustrated with big changes like that. So for those that are unaware, what we really did was take out some big key navigational components from the top of the application that everyone's used to clicking every single day, like a create button, a dashboard button, their profile icon, and we completely ripped that out and put it to the side of the product. And a lot of them were going, why are you doing this? This doesn't make any sense. I can't use the product at all. And the feedback from our design team was, well, this is awesome. You just got to get with it. And there was useful feedback from both the customers and design, but it still wasn't very nice for the customers themselves. So for those that really aren't aware, what the product used to look like was that slide on the left, which is really tiny for you, so you probably can't actually see it. But what we can see up the top on the left is the old navigation components. We had an app switcher, we had a create button and a search button. It's all there, really easy for you to use. And then on the right-hand side, we have the new UI. So what you can see is what we call our global navigation experience, how you navigate around the whole product and other products. And then on the right portion of that, sort of more content directly related to what you do on a day-to-day basis. And the design team, have a really good reasoning as to why they've done this, but it was very painful for a lot of customers originally. So what I wanted to talk about when I actually get this back, yep, that's good, is how we actually roll this change out to production for customers. So rolling out and testing in production, we had a lot of concerns, but there were sort of 3 main concerns. There was, is it ready in the first place? Is it actually ready for customers to start using? What's the impact going to be like, not just for them, but actually for us? And sort of, what does it look like when it's complete? When we say we're done, what's that definition of done actually look like? So when we ask the question, is it ready? We ask, what we're trying to actually ask ourselves is, was this change something that we ourselves would be willing to actually accept and take on? And in our particular case, the answer was yes. So internally, we'd actually been using it for about three months internally on all of our development sites. And we were very conscious of the limitations that it would actually bring. So we wanted to make sure that when we do roll out, we don't actually roll out to stuff that people aren't ready for. So one of the other questions is, what does that actual percentage rollout look like? Some of our considerations were previous tests that we'd done on customers. So before rolling out ADG3, we'd started a new trial for a single page app in the product. So for those that use ADG3 now, the whole application is, well, not the whole, but the general application is a single page application. But before that, we'd started rolling out an experiment where it was the old UI, but single page app. And those customers weren't too happy about receiving that change because, again, it was a big change and they're not happy. But then we wanted to make sure that when we start rolling this out, we don't actually roll that change out again to those new customers that had already received the previous experience. So in LaunchDarkly, we actually created sort of a prerequisite group, so an actual feature flag in LaunchDarkly with a set of all those customers that got that old change, and made sure we set a prerequisite in LaunchDarkly to actually say, do not serve this up to these people at all until we're actually really ready for it. One of our strong considerations was also the definition of done for the customers. So we need to make sure that when we rolled out those changes, our definition of the customer was actually not an individual user, it was the full site. So everyone that actually collaborated and belonged on that site got all the same experience in it at the same time. Because what you don't want is someone that's, suddenly gets a new UI change and then all of a sudden goes, how do I find anything? How do I use this? And then they look to the person sitting next to them and they're still seeing the old version. They go, how come you've got this and I don't have this? That's really frustrating. You can't even help me do my day-to-day work. So that was a really strong consideration for us when picking the appropriate key for our percentage rollouts. We also wanted to make sure that, that's about it for that. We wanted to make sure, another consideration was who gets what version. So who should be getting the change? So should it be new customers? Should it be existing customers? And what we actually did was we purposely started rolling out to existing customers first, but then when we got to a certain threshold of happiness and completeness from a feature point of view, we then started looking at how do we roll this change out just for new customers. And our actual rollout pattern hit 100% for new customers before it even hit all of our legacy existing customers. By the end of the actual project, we were rolling out at about 10% every single week from a rollout percentage to see how often people actually got the change. So another question was, what's the impact? Are we fucking the customer? Which is actually one of the Atlassian values that James was just brought up and talked about before, is don't fuck the customer. So that's a really strong consideration for us, is we know that these changes are going to hurt people, but sometimes it's for the greater good, but really there's a fine line between, she'll be right, they'll get used to it, versus, no, this is actually not right, they're not going to get used to it, they're going to leave us. So that was a really strong consideration. Another consideration was, if they do run into problems with this, how can we help them? How can we make sure that this change is easily rollbackable for them or for the entire user base? And another change was that, how can we support the actual support load? So given that we're already a product that's been around for a while, one of our primary considerations was what is the impact of the change? Can this change, I apologize, I've already gone through that bit. I'll jump into the fucking the customers, because that's sort of one of the ones that gets all the giggles from everyone. But, as Tanais talked about is, how we test huge changes in production. We had a bunch of research that showed that this design and this layout was actually going to be better for users in the long run. But for existing customers, that wasn't really the case. And people were like, oh no, I'm really used to this. You're just completely stuck up how I actually do my day-to-day work. So we needed a way for them to be able to opt out of that. So one of our considerations was actually do not roll out this to people that have actually selected to opt out. And that we control that via the context that LaunchDarkly lets us provide, so that when we actually contact and check LaunchDarkly for feature states for that customer, we provide a whole bunch of context, and then in our actual feature rules we say, for this context, don't serve this to a customer who has said don't give it to me. So that way the customer can still be happy and still get done what they want to do, while we can still progressively roll out in a non-micromanaged way. We don't have to do it for every single user. So another consideration was, how can we help them? So if a customer truly was negatively impacted, we need to be able to roll it out, and support were able to actually just be able to go in, add the customer's site ID to a list of prerequisites, and bang, the whole site doesn't actually get it anymore. That was really important for customer support to be able to really help customers when the problem happens. And one of our last considerations was, can we handle the support load? So rolling out changes and testing changes in production isn't just an engineering feat, and isn't just a growth experiment feat, and it isn't just for design and marketing. It's really also support. And one of our biggest checklists wasn't, are we ready from an engineering point of view? It's, is support ready to handle this increased load? So when we first started rolling out, we had massive spikes in support because feature wasn't complete, it wasn't as thorough as it was previously, and there were a couple of edge cases that we couldn't just catch when testing in staging and testing locally in development. They were quite quickly fixed. With the front end and what we've got in Confluence, we can actually roll out changes in a minute. So they were really quick to actually recover and fix the problems for the customers. But the support load and the support impact is still actually there. So that was a really strong consideration for us every single time we sat down and had a meeting. Should we increase it to 5%? Should we increase it to 10%, 20, 50, 100? So just when you start testing stuff in production, just keep in mind it's not just an engineering decision. It's really it's a decision for the whole team, and that includes potentially your support if you've got paid support. So lastly, we get to, are we done? So we've rolled this feature out to production. We're 100%. We're done, right? There's nothing else to do. That's actually sort of not the way that we consider it. We consider that it's only just started now. So we're actually here. We're 100%. That's actually now the base experience for customers. So what's next? For us in Confluence, we're actually experimenting right now with a bunch of navigational changes for customers, because not everyone likes the change in how they can actually navigate pages and page trees and stuff like that. So that's one of the experiences that we're trialing right now. We're also trialing a newer navigational experience on the side so that people can actually experience both the new Atlassian Home offering as well as easily get to Jira if they use Jira and other products. We're actually also asking the question, was it the right choice? So we got to 100% of customers back in August, which is nearly over 6 months ago now, and all the data is showing that, okay, yes, it looks like it's generally the right choice. There are a couple of holdouts that are still not quite happy, but over time we feel that with the right sort of level of communication with them and the right feedback from them, we can actually get the right answer from them. But it was also the right choice technically. So this was also a forcing change for us to sort of re-envisage how we do the front end in the product. It was a really big engineering feat to change what was an old legacy code base built with jQuery and even technologies before jQuery and all the way up to Backbone and luckily not Angular, but I don't mean that facetiously. But we actually got to re-envisage what that front-end code base is and what the whole deliverable pipeline is for the front end, and now we're actually a React-based code base in the front end, and it's a single-page application for the majority of user experiences. And across the board, the users are a lot happier with performance of the product right now. So outside of initially loading the page, navigating to other pages is a lot quicker than it ever used to be. But one of the questions that we didn't really expect and sort of hit us in the butt and really knocked us for a six is what needs to be cleaned up. So we've gone through, we've been making these changes, we've been building it since October 2016, and what we didn't expect is the fact that, okay, it's behind feature flags. We can actually turn this on and off via LaunchDarkly in production without any problems at all. It's actually just with a single click of the finger, you can actually turn it off or turn it on. But developers weren't actually using that experience because, again, it was behind a feature flag. So one of the things that sort of we weren't expecting was the fact that we'd have to actually go back through our code base, make that the default experience, and then actually fix our continuous integration to our CI to actually make sure that it's also testing that new experience, which is actually the default experience for customers. So there was almost as much effort pulling out that old experience in our within our build pipeline and our tests and local development as it was actually rolling out that feature in the first place. So that's a strong consideration that anyone that wants to do this kind of level of testing in production should keep in mind to a degree. But what I also wanted to sort of talk about was a couple of other ways that we at Atlassian also test in production. So experiments on people, and we get a lot of flack on Twitter for that. So some people are like, why are you doing this experiment on me? Why are you doing this experiment on that? And it's not, we don't intentionally mean to upset customers, but we've got teams that are actually dedicated to trying and improving integration experiences between all of our products and sign-up experiences and making sure that when you buy Confluence, the first email you get sends you directly to Confluence and those kind of things. So they're actually actively trying to evaluate this. So that's another way that we sort of test in production is those level of growth experiments. We also use it to control risky changes. So sometimes there's changes in the product that we can't control, we can't test effectively in development or in staging. And the only way we can really effectively test this is when we really get to production. So we come up with a design, we re-architect the underlying product and have a couple of flags, and then when the feature flags turn on for that customer, they start running that new experience. And then when it goes badly, SRE pages, and then we wake up at 3 in the morning and fix it. But that's another way that we use that. And we also, like I mentioned before, we are still using it to actually build on and improve the new UI that we've brought to Confluence today. So we're working on changing the space navigation for customers and working on a better, happy experience survey, so UMUX instead of NPS, to also check people's happiness. But I did want to actually go into a couple of gotchas that we did run into when sort of not just using LaunchDarkly, but just rolling out feature flag type changes to customers in production. So basically having multiple code paths in your product. So one gotcha, or one really cool thing to know about with LaunchDarkly, is actually the dev console. So for those that are unaware, in LaunchDarkly, when you actually set up your group in LaunchDarkly, you can actually use the dev console to see a stream of all feature flag activity. So people that are actually requesting flag X, flag Y, flag Z. If you pause that and actually click on any one of those records, you can actually see the associated context with it as well, which helps you easily sort of drill down into going, okay, I want to target these specific people, I want to target these specific features. And that helps you sort of correlate between what your product or your service is sending to LaunchDarkly versus what your feature flag should be set as in LaunchDarkly as well. Another sort of gotcha is using prerequisites. So one thing that's bit a lot of people in the past is when you might create a feature flag with a prerequisite based on another feature flag, and then later on in the future that feature flag is no longer relevant, so you delete that one. But if that is a prerequisite for another flag, all it does is remove that entry, but then that feature has a blank prerequisite. What that ends up doing is causing the feature to serve up the false condition or the default condition. So just be careful of that when actually using and removing prerequisites. With percentage rollouts, make sure that you actually click the advanced button. So you can't really see it in the screenshot there, but down the bottom after you've actually done your percentage rollouts, you've chosen 20%, 80%, or whatever. If you're multi-variant, you've got a big breakdown there. Make sure you check the advanced and make sure you're actually rolling out on the expected key. So for us at Atlassian, or at least in Confluence, our key was actually based on the users, versus for ADG3, we wanted to actually roll out on a site-by-site basis. So we had to make sure we chose the appropriate actual percentage rollout based on sites rather than on customers. So just check that advanced button and make sure you're actually doing the right thing there. And again, the last one was really about builds and devs. So I think I touched on it just before, is that if you're actually building these multiple code paths in your product, make sure you're testing them and making sure you've got a plan as part of your definition of done to actually clean that code path up when you're happy with it either being removed or being the default. So that's it. The last really thought is just please think of the customers, when you're actually rolling out changes. Thank you.